Zara pressed her face against the cold metal bars of her cage, watching the endless stream of potential buyers pass by the slave market. Her purple skin was covered in dirt and bruises, her once beautiful silver hair now matted and dull. The electronic collar around her neck hummed with energy, ready to deliver pain at the press of a button. She was Illyrian, one of the last of her kind. Her people had been peaceful traders and scholars, traveling between star systems sharing knowledge and art. That was before the hegemony came. Before they declared Lyrians were naturally suited for servitude due to their smaller stature and gentle nature. Before they hunted down every last one and sold them like cattle. The slave trader, a massive Corvan with gray scales and dead black eyes, kicked her cage. "Stand up, merchandise. Show them your breeding potential." Zara slowly rose to her feet, her legs shaking from malnutrition. She had learned not to resist anymore. The last time she fought back, they had shocked her unconscious and left her without food for 3 days. Her spirit was nearly broken, but somewhere deep inside, a tiny flame of defiance still flickered. A group of wealthy hegemony officials walked past, their expensive robes flowing behind them. One pointed at her with a jeweled finger. "What's wrong with that one? She looks half dead." The trader grinned, showing yellow teeth. "Nothing wrong that good food and discipline won't fix. She's Illyrian, perfect for household duties, very obedient once trained properly. And look at those markings on her arms, genuine genetic art. Quite valuable for collection purposes." Zara's arms bore the traditional spiral tattoos of her people, sacred marks that told the story of her family line. To them it was just decoration that increased her price. She wanted to scream that she had been a teacher, that she had guided young minds and helped preserve ancient texts. But her voice had been stolen along with her freedom. The officials moved on without interest. "Too expensive for their taste," she heard one say. Zara slumped back down, closing her eyes. Another day without sale meant another night of scraps and beatings. Hours passed. The binary suns of the trade station began to set, casting everything in an orange glow. Most buyers had gone home to their comfortable lives. Zara had almost fallen asleep when she heard unfamiliar footsteps approaching. She opened her eyes to see something she had never encountered before. The creature stood upright on 2 legs like her, but its skin was pale pink instead of purple. It had strange fur only on the top of its head, brown and messy. Its eyes were green, an unusual color that seemed to hold intelligence and something else she couldn't identify. Kindness, perhaps? She had forgotten what that looked like. The being wore simple clothes, not the elaborate outfits of the wealthy. A worn jacket and plain pants suggested it wasn't rich, yet it stood examining the cages with an expression that made Zara's heart race with something like hope. "Human," the trader spat, suddenly appearing beside the creature. "Looking for something specific? We have some new acquisitions from the Rim territories. Very exotic, a human." Zara had heard whispers about them. A young species that had recently joined the galactic community. They were said to be unpredictable, sometimes violent, but also strangely compassionate. The other slaves had shared stories, rumors really, of humans who bought slaves only to set them free. Zara had dismissed such tales as fantasy, the desperate dreams of the hopeless. The human's green eyes met hers through the bars. For a moment, time stopped. She saw something in that gaze that made her breath catch. Not the calculating stare of a buyer evaluating merchandise, but the look of someone seeing another living being in pain. "This one," the human said softly, pointing at her cage. Its voice was gentle, lacking the harsh tones she was used to. "How much?" The trader's eyes lit up with greed. Excellent choice. This is premium stock, a genuine Lyrian, very rare. Educational background makes her perfect for research assistance or scholarly work. She can read 17 different languages and has advanced knowledge of galactic history." The human frowned. "You're selling her intelligence as a feature?" "Of course. Intelligence increases value significantly. She's priced at 50,000 credits, but for a discerning buyer like yourself, I could consider 45. Zara watched the human's face change. The gentle expression hardened into something that made even the large trader step back slightly. The human species might be new to the galaxy, but there was something primal and dangerous in its posture now. 45,000, the human repeated quietly, for a sentient being. "The finest sentient being on the market," the trader said, missing the warning in the human's tone. "Guaranteed healthy, well-behaved, and productive. Full documentation of genetic purity and skill assessments included. The human was silent for a long moment, staring at Zara. She could see it thinking, calculating. Her heart sank. 45,000 credits was a fortune. This human, despite its strange kindness, was probably just another buyer who couldn't afford her. Then the human reached into its jacket and pulled out a small device. It pressed something and showed the screen to the trader. Transfer authorized. 45,000 credits. The trader's jaw dropped. You're actually buying her? Just like that? No negotiation? No inspection of her teeth and joints? Just like that. The human's voice was steel wrapped in silk. Complete the transfer now. Zara felt the world spin around her. After 3 years of captivity, someone had actually bought her. But what did this human want? What fresh hell awaited her? She had learned that hope was dangerous, yet she couldn't stop the tiny flutter in her chest as the electronic locks on her cage disengaged with a soft click. The human stepped forward and opened the cage door. Instead of grabbing her or attaching a leash, it simply stood back and extended its hand. My name is Marcus. You don't have to be afraid anymore. Zara stared at the outstretched hand, then at the human's face. Marcus. It had given her its name, spoken to her directly instead of about her. When was the last time someone had done that? She couldn't remember. Slowly, on trembling legs, she stepped out of the cage that had been her world for so long. Freedom felt impossible, terrifying, and wonderful all at once. Marcus led Zara away from the slave market through the crowded streets of Nexus Station. She followed several steps behind, as she had been trained, her eyes fixed on the ground. The electronic collar still hummed around her neck, a constant reminder of her status. Every few seconds she glanced up nervously, expecting Marcus to turn around and bark orders or strike her for some imagined offense. But Marcus just walked calmly, occasionally looking back to make sure she was keeping up. He didn't yell when she stumbled over her own feet, weakened by years of poor nutrition. He didn't curse when she accidentally bumped into a passing Corvan trader, who shoved her aside roughly. Watch where you're going, slave, the Corvan growled. Marcus stopped walking. He turned slowly, and Zara saw that dangerous look return to his green eyes. The Corvan, who was twice Marcus's size, actually took a step backward. She's not a slave, Marcus said quietly. She's a free being who deserves the same respect as anyone else. The Corvan laughed nervously. Come now, human. Look at her collar. She's clearly property. Valuable property, I might add. You should keep her on a shorter leash. What happened next shocked Zara to her core. Marcus moved faster than she thought possible for his species. In one fluid motion, he stepped forward and placed his hand on the Corvan's throat. Not violently, but firmly enough to make his point clear. She is not property, Marcus repeated, his voice carrying an edge that made several passers-by stop and stare. She is a person, and if I hear you call her anything else, we're going to have a problem. The Corvan, despite being much larger, nodded quickly and hurried away. Marcus watched him go, then turned back to Zara with that gentle expression returning to his face. Sorry about that, he said. Some people need reminding about basic decency. Zara stared at him in amazement. In 3 years of slavery, no one had ever defended her. Not once. She had watched countless beings walk past her suffering without a second thought. Yet this human, this stranger, had just confronted someone twice his size simply because they insulted her. They continued walking until they reached a small transport ship in the civilian docking bay. It was nothing fancy, clearly designed for function rather than luxury. Marcus gestured toward the boarding ramp. This is my ship, the Wanderer. Your new home, if you want it to be. Zara hesitated. The phrase, if you want it to be, confused her. Slaves didn't get to want things. They went where their owners decided. She climbed the ramp cautiously, expecting to see chains or cages inside. Instead, she found a clean, simple living space with actual furniture, books scattered around, and what appeared to be a small kitchen. Marcus noticed her confusion. You can sit anywhere you like. The couch is pretty comfortable, or there's a chair by the window if you prefer. She stood frozen in the middle of the room. Sitting on furniture without permission was unthinkable. The last time she had tried that, the punishment had been severe. I don't understand, she whispered, her voice rusty from disuse. What don't you understand? Where do you want me to work? What are my duties? When do I get food? The questions tumbled out in the mechanical way she had learned to speak to owners. Marcus's face fell. Oh, Zara, you don't have duties. You're not here to work for me. You're here because no one should live in a cage. But you bought me. You paid 45,000 credits, I did, and it was the best money I've ever spent. He moved to a cabinet and began pulling out food items. Real food. Not the nutrient paste she was used to. Are you hungry? When did you last eat? Zara's stomach cramped at the mention of food. Yesterday morning. Some scraps. Marcus stopped what he was doing and looked at her with an expression she couldn't interpret. Yesterday? Sit down. Please. Just pick any seat and sit. When she remained standing, paralyzed by years of conditioning, Marcus gently guided her to the couch. She perched on the very edge, ready to jump up at any moment. Zara, I need you to understand something very important. You are not my slave. You are not my property. You are a free being. And this collar proves nothing except that the galaxy has some very broken systems. He went back to preparing food, talking as he worked. I've been traveling the galaxy for 2 years now, and everywhere I go I see the same thing. Beings treating other beings like objects. It makes me sick. But if I'm not your slave, what am I? Marcus paused in his food preparation. You're my friend, I hope. Or at least you could be, given time. You're a guest in my home. You're a person who deserves safety and respect, and the chance to decide her own future. The words didn't make sense to Zara. Friends were something from her past life, from before the hegemony came. The concept seemed as foreign as the idea of deciding her own future. Marcus brought her a plate piled high with fresh fruit, bread, and what appeared to be some kind of stew. The smell made her mouth water, but she didn't move to touch it. It's not poisoned, Marcus said gently, and you don't need permission to eat. You never will again, not while you're with me. Slowly, hesitantly, Zara picked up a piece of fruit. It was sweet and juicy, better than anything she had tasted in years. She couldn't stop the tears that began flowing down her cheeks. Hey, it's okay, Marcus said, sitting down across from her. You're safe now. I know that's hard to believe, but you are. Why? She asked through her tears. Why did you buy me? What do you want from me? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. My grandmother used to tell me a story when I was young, about how the measure of a society isn't how it treats its most powerful members, but how it treats its most vulnerable. I've seen how this galaxy treats its vulnerable, and I decided I couldn't just stand by and watch anymore. But 45,000 credits is just money. You know what that money bought? It bought your freedom. It bought your right to choose where you go and what you do. It bought your dignity back, even if it doesn't feel like it yet. Zara ate slowly, savoring each bite while trying to process what Marcus was telling her. What happens now? Do you just let me go? That's entirely up to you. If you want to leave, I'll take you wherever you want to go. If you want to stay, you're welcome here for as long as you like. If you want to help me free other slaves, I could use the company. The choice is yours. The word choice hung in the air between them. Zara had forgotten what it meant to choose anything. For 3 years, every moment of her existence had been dictated by others. The concept of having options was overwhelming. I don't know how to choose, she admitted. Marcus smiled, and it was the first genuinely warm expression she had seen in years. That's okay. You don't have to choose anything right now. Take your time. Heal. Remember who you were before they tried to break you. The choices will come easier when you're ready. As if sensing her exhaustion, Marcus showed her to a small cabin with an actual bed, not a cage floor. This is yours for as long as you want it. The door locks from the inside, so you're completely safe. There's a bathroom through that door with hot water and soap. Hot water. Zara almost broke down again at the simple luxury of it. Marcus left her alone, and for the first time in 3 years, she locked a door with herself on the safe side of it. That night, as she lay in the soft bed, clean and fed, Zara stared at the ceiling and tried to understand what had happened to her. A human had bought her freedom for no reason other than believing she deserved it. It seemed impossible, yet here she was. For the first time in years, she began to remember who she had been before the chains. 3 days had passed since Marcus bought Zara's freedom, and she was slowly beginning to believe that this wasn't some elaborate trick. Every morning she woke expecting to find herself back in the cage, but instead she found fresh clothes laid out for her, and the smell of breakfast coming from the small kitchen. Marcus had been patient beyond anything she could have imagined. He never raised his voice, never demanded anything of her, and most remarkably, he seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts and opinions. This morning was no different. "Good morning, Zara," he said as she emerged from her cabin. "I made pancakes. My grandmother's recipe. Well adapted for what we can get out here in space. She still found it difficult to speak casually, but she was trying. Thank you, Marcus. They smell wonderful. As they ate together, Marcus pulled out a small device and began studying star charts. I've been thinking about our next destination. There's a mining station called Kepler's Rock about 2 days from here. I've heard they have a slave market there too. Zara felt her stomach tighten. The mention of slave market still triggered waves of fear and memory. You want to buy more slaves? I want to free more people, Marcus corrected gently. But only if you're comfortable with it. I won't force you to relive traumatic experiences. The fact that he even asked her opinion still amazed her. How many people have you freed? Marcus paused, looking almost embarrassed. You're the 7th. I know it's not much in the grand scheme of things, but 7? Zara stared at him. You've spent over 300,000 credits freeing slaves? Money doesn't matter if you're not using it for something worthwhile. My family owns a trading company back on Earth. I have more credits than I know what to do with, so I decided to do something meaningful with them. Zara had heard of Earth, the human homeworld, but she knew little about it. What is your world like? Marcus's expression brightened. It's beautiful. Blue oceans, green forests, mountains that stretch up into the clouds. But the best thing about Earth isn't the scenery. It's the principle we try to live by. We believe that all intelligent beings have inherent worth and deserve freedom and dignity. All beings? Even aliens? Of course. Intelligence and consciousness aren't limited to one species. Some of the humans back home don't understand that yet. But they're learning. We're a young species and we make mistakes, but we try to do better. This concept fascinated Zara. In her experience, most species looked out only for their own kind. The hegemony actively oppressed anyone who wasn't part of their ruling class. Yet here was a human spending his personal fortune to free aliens he had never met. Marcus, can I ask you something personal? Anything. Why do you really do this? I mean, beyond the principles. What made you start? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. My younger sister, Emma. She's not like other humans. What you would call neurotypical. She thinks differently, learns differently. For most of her childhood, people treated her like she was less than human, because she didn't fit their narrow definition of normal. He looked up at Zara, and she saw pain in his green eyes. I watched her struggle with people who couldn't see past her differences to the brilliant, kind person she actually is. When I got out into the galaxy and saw how beings treat each other, especially those they consider lesser, it reminded me of what Emma went through. I couldn't stand by and watch. Zara felt something shift inside her chest. This human's compassion wasn't abstract or philosophical. It was personal, born from love and protective instincts. Your sister sounds wonderful, she is. She's studying xenobiology now. Wants to work with alien species to bridge understanding between different forms of intelligence. She'd love to meet you, actually. She's always wanted to learn about Lyrian educational methods. The casual way Marcus spoke about introducing her to his family, as if she were a friend rather than a former slave, brought tears to Zara's eyes. You would want your family to meet me? Why wouldn't I? You're one of the smartest people I've ever met. Did you know you've been unconsciously correcting the computer's translation algorithms? Your linguistic knowledge is incredible. Zara blinked in surprise. She hadn't realized she'd been doing that. I was a teacher before the hegemony came. I specialized in comparative linguistics and cultural studies. I thought so. The way you process language patterns gave it away. What did you teach? For the first time in years, Zara found herself talking about her old life. She told Marcus about her students, young Lyrians eager to learn about the galaxy beyond their world. She described the university where she worked, with its crystalline spires and floating libraries. She spoke of the research she had been conducting into the linguistic evolution of spacefaring species. Marcus listened intently, asking thoughtful questions and showing genuine interest in her work. That research sounds groundbreaking. Have you thought about continuing it? How could I? All my notes, my data, everything was destroyed when they conquered my world. But the knowledge is still in your head, right? And now you have access to a whole galaxy of languages and cultures. You could start over, maybe even do better work than before. The idea was intoxicating and terrifying. I don't know if I remember enough. It's been so long since I thought of myself as a scholar. Knowledge isn't something that just disappears, Marcus said firmly. It might be buried under trauma and fear, but it's still there. You just need time to remember who you are. Later that day, Marcus surprised her by setting up a workspace in the ship's common area. He had downloaded linguistic databases from the Galactic Network and set up a comfortable chair with good lighting. "What is this?" Zara asked. "Your office if you want it. No pressure. But I thought you might enjoy having access to research materials again. Consider it part of your recovery." Zara approached the setup hesitantly. The databases contained linguistic samples from dozens of species. Some she had studied before and others completely new to her. Her fingers trembled as she activated the first file. "I don't know where to start," she whispered. "Start anywhere. Start with something that interests you. Remember, this isn't work. This is just you rediscovering something you love." As Zara began exploring the databases, something inside her began to awaken, the part of her that had been dormant since her capture. The scholar and teacher she had once been stirred to life. She found herself making connections between languages, spotting patterns and evolutionary links that the databases had missed. "Marcus," she called out excitedly after several hours of work. "Look at this. The Corvan trade language has grammatical structures that mirror ancient Lyrian. I think there might have been contact between our species thousands of years ago, before either of us achieved spaceflight." Marcus came over to look at her work, and his face lit up with genuine enthusiasm. "That's amazing. How did you spot that connection?" "The verb conjugation patterns are almost identical, just evolved differently over time. If I'm right, it could rewrite the entire history of early galactic contact. You should publish this. The galactic academic community would be fascinated." The idea of publishing research again, of contributing to galactic knowledge, made Zara's heart race with excitement. For the first time since her capture, she felt like herself again. "Thank you," she said quietly, "not just for the research setup, but for helping me remember who I am." Marcus smiled. "You never stopped being who you are, Zara. You just needed someone to remind you that you're worth believing in." That night, as Zara worked late into the evening on her linguistic analysis, she realized something profound had changed. The electronic collar still hummed around her neck, but she no longer felt enslaved. Marcus had given her something more valuable than freedom. He had given her back her identity, her purpose, and most importantly, her hope for the future. She was no longer just a former slave. She was Zara the linguist, Zara the teacher, Zara the free being who could choose her own path. And tomorrow, if she decided to, she would help Marcus free another soul who had forgotten who they were meant to be. Kepler's Rock was a dismal place. The mining station hung in the shadow of an asteroid field, its hull stained with decades of space dust and industrial grime. As Marcus and Zara approached in the Wanderer, she could see the telltale signs of a slave-dependent economy. Massive cargo holds for transporting sentient beings, security checkpoints designed to prevent escapes, and the grim efficiency of a place where suffering was profitable. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Marcus asked as they docked. "You don't have to come with me to the market. You could stay on the ship." Zara touched the collar around her neck, which Marcus had offered to remove several times. She had asked him to leave it for now, not because she felt enslaved, but because she had a plan. "No, I want to help. I think I can be useful." "How so?" "I still look like a slave. I can get closer to the cages than you can. Talk to the prisoners, find out who needs help most urgently." Marcus frowned with concern. "Zara, that's incredibly brave, but also dangerous. If someone recognizes that you're not actually under control, they won't. I know how to act the part. Besides," she said with a small smile, "I have you watching my back." The trust in her voice made Marcus's chest tighten with emotion. 2 weeks ago, she had been terrified of her own shadow. Now she was volunteering to walk back into the nightmare she had escaped, all to help others. The slave market on Kepler's Rock was larger and more organized than the one where Marcus had found Zara. Rows of cages stretched across a massive warehouse, filled with beings from dozens of different species. The air was thick with despair and the stench of unwashed bodies. Marcus posed as a wealthy trader looking for specific types of workers, while Zara trailed behind him in the submissive posture she had perfected during her captivity. To any observer, she was simply his property, brought along to evaluate potential purchases. As they moved through the market, Zara's heart broke repeatedly. She saw younglings barely old enough to be away from their families, elderly beings who should have been respected for their wisdom. and proud species she recognized from her academic studies, all reduced to merchandise. But she also saw something the slave traders couldn't: the small gestures of solidarity between prisoners. A strong being sharing their meager food with a weaker one, an older captive comforting a frightened youth. Even in this place of horror, compassion survived. "That one," she whispered to Marcus as they passed a particular cage. "The small one in the corner." Marcus followed her gaze to see a young Delian no more than a child by their species standards. The little being was curled up alone, their iridescent scales dull with malnutrition. Most of the other prisoners were giving them space, but not out of cruelty. Zara could see they were protecting the youngster, keeping the more aggressive captives away. "What makes them special?" Marcus asked quietly. "Delians are empaths. They feel the emotions of everyone around them. Can you imagine being that young and sensitive, trapped in a place like this? They're probably experiencing the despair of every single prisoner here." Marcus's jaw tightened. "How much do you think they'd want for a child?" "Too much. Empathic species are rare and valuable." "But Marcus, there's something else." Zara paused, watching the interactions between the prisoners. "Look at how the others are behaving around them. Even in their own suffering, they're trying to shield a child. If we free just one being, it should be the one these people are sacrificing to protect." A massive Corvan trader noticed Marcus's interest and lumbered over. "Ah, human customer. You have excellent taste. That little one is premium merchandise. Pure-blood Delian, untrained but with exceptional sensitivity ratings." "Untrained?" Marcus's voice was carefully neutral, but Zara could hear the anger underneath. "Never been broken in. You'll have the pleasure of molding them yourself. Of course, that means a higher price. 30,000 credits." Zara saw Marcus's hands clench into fists, but his voice remained steady. "That seems reasonable for quality merchandise. I'll take them." The speed of the transaction clearly surprised the trader, but he wasn't about to argue with easy money. Within minutes, the little Delian was being transferred to Marcus's custody. The child looked up at him with huge, terrified eyes that shimmered with unshed tears. Marcus knelt down to their level, ignoring the shocked stares of nearby traders. "Hello there. My name is Marcus. What's your name?" The Delian whispered something in their native language too quietly to hear. "They said their name is Kira," Zara translated softly, "and they're asking if you're going to hurt them." Marcus's expression gentled even further. "Tell them no, Kira. Tell them they're safe now and they're never going back in a cage." As Zara translated, she watched amazement spread across the little Delian's face. The other prisoners had heard the exchange too, and word began spreading in whispered conversations across multiple languages. "We should go," Marcus said, standing up. But as they turned to leave, a commotion erupted near the market entrance. Hegemony security forces were conducting a sweep, checking documentation and ownership papers. They were looking for something or someone specific, and their search was violent and thorough. "Move," Marcus said urgently, but they were too late. A security captain spotted them and approached with his weapon drawn. "You there, human. What's your business here?" Marcus presented his trader identification and documentation for Kira. Everything was legitimate, purchased legally just minutes before. But the captain's eyes lingered on Zara. "That one looks familiar. Remove her collar, now." Zara's heart pounded, but she had faced worse fears than this. As Marcus reluctantly deactivated her collar, she stood straighter, letting her true intelligence show in her eyes for the first time in public since her capture. "Zara of the teaching caste, formerly of Lyria Prime," she said clearly. "Free citizen traveling under human protection." The captain's eyes widened. "You're supposed to be dead. The records show all Lyrian intellectuals were eliminated." "Records can be wrong," Marcus interjected, stepping slightly in front of Zara. "She's under my protection as a free being." "Free being?" The captain laughed harshly. "Lyrians don't get to be free. They're property by hegemony law." What happened next was why humans were quickly becoming legendary throughout the galaxy. Marcus didn't draw a weapon or make threats. Instead, he activated his communicator and spoke clearly. "This is Marcus Chen, certified trader, calling the Terran Embassy on Nexus Station. I need to report a violation of interspecies rights treaties by hegemony forces." The captain's confidence wavered. Humans were new to the galactic scene, but they had already proven that they backed up their words with action. Earth's military was small but effective. and they had made it clear that they protected their citizens and those under their protection. You can't just claim random aliens as protected persons, the captain protested. Actually, I can. Marcus produced another document. Zara has been granted asylum status under Terran law. Any attempt to harm or re-enslave her is an act of aggression against Earth. It wasn't entirely true, but it was close enough to make the captain hesitate. Humans had a reputation for creative interpretations of law when it served justice. The standoff lasted several tense minutes before the captain finally backed down. As the security forces withdrew, Zara realized she was shaking. That was incredibly risky, she whispered to Marcus. Maybe, he agreed, but some things are worth the risk. As they left Kepler's Rock with little Kira safely aboard the Wanderer, Zara reflected on what she had witnessed. Marcus had risked his own safety, spent 30,000 credits and potentially created diplomatic incidents, all to save a single child he had never met. This was what made humans different. Not their technology or their military might, but their willingness to put themselves on the line for complete strangers. They saw suffering and felt compelled to act, even when it was inconvenient or dangerous. That night, as Kira slept safely in a real bed for the first time in months, Zara found Marcus staring out at the stars. "Thinking about your sister?" she asked. "Among other things, I was thinking about how proud she'd be of what we did today." "We?" Marcus smiled. "You think I could have managed any of that without you? You spotted Kira. You understood the social dynamics in that market. You stood up to that security captain with more courage than anyone should have to show. We're a team now, whether you planned it or not." Zara felt warmth spread through her chest. A team. Partners in something meaningful. She had gone from slave to scholar to liberator in the span of weeks, all because one human had seen her as worth saving. "Where to next?" she asked. "Wherever we're needed most," Marcus replied. "The galaxy is full of Kiras and Zaras who need to remember that they're worth more than the price on their heads." Looking out at the infinite stars, Zara felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Excitement for the future. Together they were going to change things, one freed soul at a time. 3 months had passed since Kira joined their small family aboard the Wanderer. The young Delian had blossomed under Marcus and Zara's care, their scales regaining their natural iridescence and their empathic abilities proving invaluable in their rescue operations. They could sense the emotional states of enslaved beings from a distance, helping the team identify those in the most urgent need. Their methods had evolved too. What started as simple purchases had grown into a sophisticated operation. Zara's academic connections helped them identify slave markets across the galaxy, while Marcus's family business provided both funding and legitimate cover for their activities. They had freed 18 beings so far, establishing a network of safe houses and transport routes, but their growing success had attracted unwanted attention. "We have a problem," Zara announced as she entered the ship's common area where Marcus was teaching Kira to read Standard Galactic. The young Delian had shown remarkable intelligence once their basic needs were met, and they soaked up knowledge like a sponge. Marcus looked up from the lesson. "What kind of problem?" "I've been monitoring communications through my old academic contacts. The hegemony has issued a warrant for a human matching your description. They're calling you a terrorist and economic saboteur." Kira's scales darkened with worry. Despite their youth, their empathic abilities made them acutely aware of tension and danger. "Are they going to hurt Marcus?" they asked in their soft musical voice. "Not if I can help it," Zara said firmly. "But we need to be smarter about our operations. They're specifically targeting human traders who've been purchasing large numbers of slaves." Marcus closed the reading tablet and ran his hands through his hair. "How bad is it?" "Bad enough that they've put a bounty on your head. 500,000 credits for your capture alive." Zara sat down across from him. "Marcus, maybe it's time to consider backing off, at least temporarily." "Absolutely not." Marcus's response was immediate and firm. "There are people suffering in cages right now who need our help. I'm not going to abandon them because some tyrants put a price on my head." This was the Marcus that Zara had come to know well over the past months. Stubborn to a fault when it came to matters of justice, willing to risk everything for beings he'd never met. It was admirable and terrifying in equal measure. "Then we need a new approach," she said. "Something that doesn't involve you walking into slave markets personally." Kira suddenly straightened, their scales shifting to a brighter pattern that indicated excitement. "I have an idea. What if we don't buy them? What if we steal them? Both adults stared at the young Delian in surprise. Kira, Marcus said carefully, we can't just break into slave markets and— Not markets, Kira interrupted, their empathic abilities letting them sense the direction of Marcus's thoughts. Transport ships. I can feel the emotions of enslaved beings from much farther away than we thought. If we intercept slave ships in transit, we could free everyone aboard without anyone knowing until it's too late. Zara's mind began racing through the implications. It's risky, but it could work. If we target ships in deep space away from hegemony patrols, we'd be pirates, Marcus pointed out. We'd be liberators, Zara corrected. And technically, piracy laws don't apply when the cargo is illegally enslaved sentient beings. I've researched the legal precedents. Marcus looked between his two companions, seeing the determination in both their eyes. Zara had grown from a broken slave into a fierce advocate for justice. Kira, despite their youth, possessed wisdom beyond their years and an unshakable moral compass. How could he say no to such conviction? All right, he said finally. But we do this smart. No unnecessary violence. No harming crew members who are just doing their jobs. And we make sure every freed being has somewhere safe to go. Their first target was a medium-sized transport ship called the Profit Margin, carrying 47 enslaved beings from a recently conquered world to the slave markets of the core systems. Kira had sensed their despair from 3 star systems away, describing it as a wound in space itself. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Marcus would pilot a small shuttle to dock with the transport, claiming mechanical difficulties that required assistance. While the crew was distracted, Zara would slice their communications and security systems using skills she'd learned from the freed beings in their network. Kira would use their empathic abilities to calm the slaves and prevent panic during the rescue. Everything went perfectly until they discovered that one of the ship's crew members was also enslaved. Please, the young Corvin engineer begged as they secured the transport ship. I know you're here for the cargo, but I'm not crew. I'm property too. My owner leases me to the shipping company. Marcus felt his heart sink. Their carefully planned operation had just become infinitely more complicated. They couldn't leave an enslaved being behind, but taking a crew member would definitely be noticed when the ship reached its destination. We'll figure something out, he assured the engineer. What's your name? Grix, I maintain the engines and life support systems. Been doing it for 6 years since my owner bought me. Zara appeared beside them, having finished disabling the ship's communications. Marcus, we have another problem. Some of the slaves in the cargo hold are sick, badly sick. If we don't get them medical attention soon— It was Kira who provided the solution. The young Delian approached the ship's captain, who had been secured but unharmed, and spoke in their gentle voice. Captain, you seem like someone who cares about following proper procedures. The captain, a grizzled hegemony veteran, looked confused. What are you talking about, child? Your ship's manifest shows 47 units of cargo, but you actually have 48 enslaved beings aboard. That's a violation of transport regulations. You could lose your shipping license. Zara caught on immediately, and if one of your crew members is actually enslaved, that violates about 12 different labor laws. The penalties would be severe. The captain's face went pale as he realized the implications. If this became official, his career was over. What do you want? Your cooperation, Marcus said simply. We're going to report that your ship suffered a catastrophic systems failure in deep space. Total loss of cargo and crew, including Grix here. You and your remaining crew will be picked up by a hegemony patrol in about 6 hours. And if I refuse? Kira's scales shifted to a pattern that indicated sadness. Then we report the violations in your manifest to the Hegemony Transport Authority. Either way, these beings go free. The only question is whether you go free too. Faced with the choice between cooperation and career suicide, the captain chose wisely. 6 hours later, 48 formerly enslaved beings were aboard various ships in Marcus's growing network of allies, heading toward safe planets where they could build new lives. Grix had volunteered to join their operation, contributing engineering skills that would prove invaluable. But as they celebrated their successful mission, Zara noticed that Marcus seemed troubled. What's wrong? She asked as they watched Kira teaching some of the younger rescued beings a Delian children's song. I've been thinking about scalability, Marcus replied. We freed 48 people today, and it felt like the most important thing in the universe. But there are millions of enslaved beings across the galaxy. How many can we realistically save? One at a time, Zara said simply. That's how all change happens. One person, one choice, one act of compassion at a time. But is it enough? Zara was quiet for a moment, watching Kira's gentle interaction with the traumatized children they'd rescued. Marcus, do you know what you've really done? You haven't just freed a few dozen beings. You've created a symbol. Every slave who hears about the human who spends his fortune buying freedom. Every trader who thinks twice before mistreating their cargo, because humans might be watching. Every government official who remembers that Earth takes slavery seriously. That's impact beyond numbers. Marcus considered this. You think we're actually making a difference? I know we are, because I'm living proof of it. 3 months ago, I was a broken thing in a cage. Now I'm a free being fighting for justice. You didn't just save my life, Marcus. You gave me back my purpose. As if sensing the emotional weight of the conversation, Kira approached them. The little ones are asking for bedtime stories. Zara, will you tell them about the time Marcus scared off those Corvin bullies just by talking? Zara smiled. I think that's a perfect story for tonight. As they headed toward the common area where the rescued children waited, Marcus realized that Zara was right. They might not be able to save everyone, but they were changing the galaxy one saved soul at a time. And sometimes that was exactly how revolutions began. The hegemony could put prices on their heads and call them terrorists, but they couldn't stop the simple truth that had started this whole journey. Every sentient being deserved freedom, dignity, and the chance to choose their own destiny. As long as there were cages, there would be humans willing to break them open. The trap was perfectly laid, and Marcus walked right into it. It should have been a routine information-gathering mission. A contact on Meridian Station had reported a massive slave auction, the largest in years, with beings from 12 different conquered worlds being sold to the highest bidders. Marcus, Zara, and Kira had arrived separately to scout the operation and identify the most vulnerable targets for rescue. But as Marcus approached the auction house, he found himself surrounded by hegemony security forces. Admiral Voss himself stepped out from behind a cargo container, his cold smile revealing that this had all been planned. Marcus Chen of Earth, the Admiral announced. You're under arrest for terrorism, economic sabotage, and theft of hegemony property valued at over 2 million credits. Marcus kept his hands visible and his voice calm, though his heart was racing. I think there's been a mistake, Admiral. I'm just a trader looking to make some purchases. Spare me the act, human. We know exactly who you are and what you've been doing. Did you really think you could steal from the hegemony without consequences? From her position across the marketplace, Zara watched in horror as Marcus was surrounded. She activated her communicator, sending a coded warning to Kira and their network of allies. Then she began moving through the crowd, her mind racing through possible rescue scenarios. Admiral Voss continued his monologue, clearly enjoying his moment of triumph. You humans are all the same. You think your naive idealism gives you the right to interfere with legitimate business, but the hegemony has been dealing with troublemakers for centuries. By enslaving innocent beings, Marcus asked. By treating sentient life as cargo. By maintaining order. By ensuring that the strong lead and the weak serve. It's the natural way of things. No, Marcus said firmly. It's not. The Admiral's smile faded. You'll have plenty of time to reconsider that opinion. Terrorism charges carry a life sentence in the labor mines. I wonder how long a soft human will last down there. As the security forces moved to arrest Marcus, something unexpected happened. The enslaved beings in the nearby holding pens began to sing. It started with a single voice, Illyrian like Zara, singing an ancient song of freedom. Others joined in, their voices creating a haunting harmony that echoed across the station. The melody was picked up by beings from different species, each adding their own cultural variations until it became something new and universal. Admiral Voss looked around in confusion as more voices joined the chorus. Even some of the traders and station workers had stopped to listen. What is this nonsense? Make them stop. But the song continued, growing stronger with each passing moment. Zara recognized what was happening. Word of Marcus's work had spread further than they had realized. These beings knew who he was, what he represented. They were singing for him, showing the galaxy that his actions had given them hope. The distraction was exactly what Zara needed. Moving quickly through the crowd, she reached the security perimeter and activated a device Grix had built for emergencies. The electromagnetic pulse disabled the security force's weapons and communication equipment, creating chaos in their ranks. Now would be a good time to run, she shouted to Marcus. Marcus broke free from his captors and sprinted toward Zara's position. Behind them, Admiral Voss was screaming orders at his confused troops. But the singing continued, now so loud it drowned out his commands. They fought their way through the panicked crowd toward the docking bay, where Kira waited with the Wanderer. But Admiral Voss wasn't finished yet. As they reached the ship, they found it surrounded by hegemony fighters. "You're not going anywhere, human," the Admiral's voice crackled over the comm system. "Surrender now or we'll blast you and your ship to atoms." Kira's voice came over their private channel. "Marcus, I can sense something. The slaves in the holding pens, they're not just singing anymore. They're coordinating." Before anyone could ask what that meant, they had their answer. All across the station, enslaved beings began acting in unison. Service slaves stopped working and sat down where they were. Maintenance crews abandoned their posts. Kitchen staff set down their tools. It was a coordinated strike, happening simultaneously throughout the station. "What's happening?" Admiral Voss demanded over the comm. "Revolution," Marcus said simply. The station's systems began failing as essential services ground to a halt. Life support, artificial gravity. Even the basic lighting started to flicker. The hegemony forces found themselves dealing with a crisis that no amount of military force could solve. "You did this," the Admiral accused. "You turned them against us." "No," Zara said, taking the comm from Marcus. "We just reminded them that they had a choice." In the chaos that followed, several slave transport ships managed to break free from the station and jump to hyperspace. Others opened their cargo holds, allowing captives to escape into the station corridors. It wasn't a complete liberation, but it was something the hegemony had never faced before. Organized resistance from their victims. Marcus. Zara and Kira managed to escape in the confusion, but not before witnessing something that would haunt Admiral Voss for the rest of his career. As the Wanderer pulled away from Meridian Station, they could see beings throughout the facility standing at windows and viewports, still singing that song of freedom. "How many do you think got away?" Kira asked as they jumped to hyperspace. "Hundreds," Zara replied, monitoring the communication channels. "Maybe thousands. Ships are reporting escaped slaves all across this sector." Marcus slumped in his pilot's chair, overwhelmed by what they had witnessed. "I can't believe it. They organized themselves. They chose to fight back. Because you showed them it was possible," Zara said softly. "For years they've lived in cages, told they were property, convinced they had no power. But when they saw humans willing to risk everything to free complete strangers, it reminded them of their own worth." Over the following days, reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The Meridian incident, as it became known, had sparked slave revolts on dozens of worlds. Some were brutally suppressed, but others succeeded in freeing thousands of beings. The hegemony's iron grip on their slave-based economy was beginning to crack, but the personal cost was high. Earth's embassy received formal complaints from the hegemony, demanding that Marcus be extradited for trial. The bounty on his head increased to 1 million credits, and wanted posters with his image appeared on every major trade route. "I'm toxic now," Marcus said as they hid in a safe system, planning their next move. "Anyone who helps me becomes a target. Then we'll be targets together," Zara replied without hesitation. "You think I'm going back to a life of hiding in the shadows while beings suffer in cages?" Kira, who had grown taller and more confident over the months, added their voice to the conversation. "Marcus, before you found me, I thought I would die in that cage. Now I know what it means to have hope. You can't take that away from me by giving up." Marcus looked at his unlikely family, these beings who had become more important to him than his own safety. Zara, the brilliant scholar who had rediscovered her strength. Kira, the empathic child who saw the best in everyone. Grix and the others who had joined their cause. They were all willing to risk everything because they believed in something better. "All right," he said finally, "but we're going to need help, real help. The kind that can stand up to the hegemony." Zara smiled, and it was the expression of someone who had just had a brilliant idea. "I know exactly who to call." 3 days later, Marcus found himself in a secure communication facility, speaking directly with the Terran Colonial Defense Force. The conversation lasted for hours, but the outcome was exactly what Zara had hoped for. Earth was officially recognizing the Galactic Liberation Network as a legitimate humanitarian organization. Any attacks on their operations would be considered acts of war against the Terran Federation. The hegemony could put bounties on their heads, but they couldn't touch them without facing the consequences. Why? Marcus asked the Admiral on the screen. Why is Earth willing to risk diplomatic relations over this? The Admiral, a stern woman with gray hair and kind eyes, smiled. Because you represent everything humanity stands for, son. The moment we stop fighting for the freedom of others is the moment we lose our own souls. As the transmission ended, Marcus felt a weight lift from his shoulders. They were no longer alone in their fight. Behind them stood not just their small network of allies, but the full might of humanity's moral conviction. So what now? Kira asked. Marcus looked out at the stars, thinking of all the beings still trapped in cages across the galaxy. Now we stop hiding. Now we show the hegemony what humans do when someone threatens the innocent. The war for galactic freedom was about to begin, and Marcus Chen, former traitor turned liberator, would be leading the charge. 2 years after the Meridian incident, the galaxy was a very different place. Zara stood at the podium of the Galactic Ethics Council, addressing representatives from 47 different species. The same electronic collar that had once marked her as property now sat in the Council's museum, a reminder of humanity's impact on galactic civilization. The Universal Declaration of Sentient Rights, she announced, has now been ratified by 31 star systems, representing over 60% of the galactic population. Slavery is officially illegal in the majority of civilized space. The applause was thunderous. In the audience, Marcus watched with pride as his former slave, now the director of the Galactic Liberation Network, commanded the attention of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Beside him, Kira translated the proceedings into 17 different languages for the benefit of newly freed beings who were still learning Standard Galactic. The transformation hadn't happened overnight, and it hadn't been without cost. The hegemony had fought viciously to maintain their slave-based economy, leading to 3 years of bitter conflict that humans would later call the Freedom Wars. But they had underestimated 2 crucial factors: the determination of humanity when fighting for justice, and the power of hope among the oppressed. What started as Marcus's simple act of buying one slave's freedom had grown into a galaxy-spanning movement. The Galactic Liberation Network now operated openly, with funding from Earth and dozens of allied worlds. Their fleet of rescue ships had freed over 50,000 beings, while their legal advocacy had led to the liberation of millions more through diplomatic channels. The hegemony still existed, but their power was broken. Admiral Voss had been arrested for war crimes, and most of their former territory had been placed under Galactic Council oversight. The process of rebuilding would take decades, but for the first time in centuries, beings across the galaxy could go to sleep knowing they wouldn't wake up in chains. After the council session, Marcus found Zara in her office working on her latest research project. She had never returned to pure linguistics, instead focusing on developing rehabilitation programs for former slaves. Her work had become the gold standard for trauma recovery across the galaxy. Another successful vote, Marcus said, settling into the chair across from her desk. Your grandmother would be proud. Zara looked up and smiled. She would have loved to see this day, a galaxy where knowledge matters more than force, where the strong protect the weak instead of exploiting them. Any word from the Outer Rim territories? Good news, actually. The last 3 hegemony slave camps were liberated yesterday. Grix led the operation personally. He says to tell you that the new navigation upgrades worked perfectly. Marcus shook his head in amazement. Grix had become one of their most effective field commanders, his engineering skills proving invaluable in complex rescue operations. The young Corvin, who had once been leased like equipment, was now helping to liberate entire star systems. Sometimes I can barely believe how far we've all come, Marcus said. Sometimes I think about that day in the slave market, Zara replied. When you asked my price and I thought my life was over. I never imagined that moment would lead to all this. Through the office window, they could see the bustling spaceport of New Geneva, humanity's newest colony world. It had been established specifically as a refuge for former slaves, a place where beings from hundreds of different species could build new lives together. The site never failed to move Marcus, children of different species playing together, adults sharing knowledge and skills across cultural barriers, all of them free to choose their own destinies. Kira appeared in the doorway, now fully grown and serving as the network's director of empathic services. Their natural abilities had proven invaluable in helping traumatized beings heal from their experiences. "Marcus, there's someone here to see you." Marcus looked curious. "Who?" "A delegation from Earth. Your sister is with them." Marcus's face lit up with joy. Emma had been scheduled to visit for months, but her work with the Terran Xenobiology Institute had kept her busy cataloging the diverse life forms they'd encountered on recently liberated worlds. The reunion took place in the main conference room, where Emma Chen embraced her older brother with tears in her eyes. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. "What you've done here, it's changed everything." "Not just me," Marcus replied, gesturing to his friends. "All of us together." Emma turned to meet Zara and Kira, her face bright with curiosity and respect. "I've read all your papers, Zara. Your work on cross-species trauma recovery is brilliant. And Kira, the empathic therapy protocols you've developed are being studied across the galaxy." The formal delegation that accompanied Emma brought news from Earth. The Terran Federation was establishing a new department of Galactic Humanitarian Affairs, with Marcus nominated to serve as its first director. The position would give him the resources to expand the Liberation Network's operations even further. "It's an honor," Marcus said, "but I'll need time to consider it. This work has always been about more than just official positions." That evening, the old crew gathered for dinner at Marcus's home on New Geneva. The table was crowded with beings from 6 different species, all of them part of the extended family that had grown around their original mission. Children ran between the adults, their laughter filling the air with joy. As they shared stories and planned future operations, Marcus felt a deep sense of contentment. He thought back to that day on Nexus Station, when he had impulsively bought Zara's freedom. At the time, it had seemed like such a small gesture, barely a drop in the ocean of galactic suffering. Now he understood that there were no small gestures when it came to justice. Every act of compassion rippled outward, touching lives in ways that couldn't be predicted or measured. One freed slave had become a galactic advocate. One rescued child had grown into a healer. One engineer's liberation had led to the freedom of thousands. "What are you thinking about?" Zara asked, noticing his contemplative expression. "Just how far we've come," Marcus replied, "and how far we still have to go." Kira, their scales shifting to patterns of contentment and hope, added their voice to the conversation. "The galaxy is healing. I can feel it in the emotional resonance of every world we visit. Fear is being replaced by hope, despair by determination. And it all started with one human who believed that every life has value," Zara said softly. Marcus shook his head. "It started long before me. It started with the first being who saw suffering and decided to do something about it. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. With the right heart," Emma added. "That's what makes all the difference." As the evening wound down and their friends departed to their own homes, Marcus stood on his balcony looking up at the stars. Somewhere out there, beings were still trapped in cages, still told they were worthless, still convinced that freedom was impossible. But they were no longer alone in their darkness. The galaxy had learned something important from humanity, that compassion was not weakness, that protecting the vulnerable was the highest calling of the strong, and that one person willing to stand up for justice could change the course of civilizations. Zara joined him on the balcony, following his gaze to the stars. "Regrets?" she asked. "None," Marcus said firmly. "You? Only that it took so long for someone like you to come along." They stood in comfortable silence, 2 friends who had found each other in the darkest of circumstances and helped light a flame that had spread across the galaxy. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new beings to rescue, new systems to liberate. But tonight, they could rest in the knowledge that their small act of defiance against injustice had become something magnificent. In the distance, they could see ships arriving and departing from the spaceport. Many carried former slaves traveling to new worlds, families reunited after years of separation, children who would grow up free because someone had been willing to pay the price for their liberation. Marcus smiled, thinking of his grandmother's old saying about measuring societies by how they treated the vulnerable. By that standard, the galaxy was finally becoming the place it was always meant to be. A community where every sentient being could reach for the stars, no longer chained by the cruelty of others but lifted up by the endless capacity for human compassion. The age of slavery was ending. The age of freedom had begun. And it all started with one simple decision: to see a suffering being in a cage and refuse to walk away. That, Marcus reflected, was perhaps the most human thing of all.